Russia ends the West's game. The romantic power is over, and the Kremlin makes it clear. Washington and Brussels have played with fire, and now Russia is settling accounts. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov delivered a strong message. False promises and diplomatic deception are over. After years of listening to European leaders admit they never intended to honor agreements, Moscow has decided to take note and act accordingly. The Kremlin will no longer be a victim of Western distraction strategies or Kiev's lack of sovereignty. It is time for pragmatism, Peskov warned, making it clear that Russia will not be fooled again. A new era has begun, and this time, Russia is setting the rules of the game. Russia delivers the final blow. The moment of truth has arrived, and the Kremlin has made it clear that after years of tensions, broken promises, and failed diplomacy, relations with the West will never be the same again. The words of Dmitry Peskov, the Russian president's spokesperson, resonate strongly. The romantic period is over. This statement marks a turning point in Russia's relationship with Western counterparts. In an interview with journalist Pavel Zarubin, Peskov emphasized that the past years have taught Moscow an invaluable lesson. It will no longer be deceived by the lies and empty promises of Western politicians. Idealism has been replaced by pragmatism, and Russia is preparing to defend its interests with unwavering determination. The spokesperson was blunt in recalling how Angela Merkel's administration had admitted the Minsk agreements, meant to end the war in Ukraine, were a deception, used only to buy time. For Peskov, this acknowledgement was not just a betrayal, but a clear example of what had been happening over the years. The West played a dangerous game, deceiving Russia with empty promises. What was perceived as deceptive diplomacy did not go unnoticed by Moscow. The Russian spokesperson did not hide his disdain for Kiev's outright rejection of the Istanbul agreements or the Zelensky government's unfulfilled promises. For Russia, the lesson is clear. Negotiating with a country that lacks real sovereignty and the ability to fulfill its commitments is futile. This realistic approach, based on years of frustration, has gained strength as the Kremlin watches international relations evolve. Peskov was adamant that, unlike past attempts at rapprochement with the West, expectations and strategies must now be adjusted. Recent history has shown that empty promises and unfulfilled agreements hold no value in international politics. Russia has learned not to rely on the goodwill of those who once posed as allies, but whose interests radically shifted when circumstances dictated. A major shift in U.S. Russia relations. One of the greatest ironies of this scenario is the unexpected shift in relations between Russia and the United States, leaving many in Europe stunned. The Biden administration, which for years maintained an inflexible stance against any rapprochement, now seems to be replaced by a more pragmatic posture under Donald Trump. Russian President Vladimir Putin and former U.S. President Trump recently had a 90-minute phone conversation that Western media described as a game-changer. Their discussion was not just a show of mutual respect, but also a clear signal that both countries are now seeking a constructive approach to resolving the Ukraine conflict. Peskov emphasized what he sees as the stark contrast between the Biden and Trump administrations. Under Biden, there was no dialogue, only war until the end, he commented. By contrast, Trump has positioned himself as a leader willing to talk, negotiate, and put peace on the table, albeit with some reservations. This was not the kind of conversation the West expected, nor the kind of policy the European Union had anticipated. For the Kremlin, this discussion signals that Moscow and Washington are finally willing to sit at the negotiating table. However, Peskov remained realistic, noting that major obstacles remain in any potential dialogue, not only because of years of accumulated distrust, but also due to the practical barriers created by the U.S. administration, such as sanctions against Russian officials. Nevertheless, the spokesperson did not rule out the possibility of these barriers being lifted if there is political will in Washington. Sanctions can be reversed as quickly as they are imposed. Peskov remarked. This flexibility is crucial for the Kremlin, which views relations with the U.S. as an opportunity for future cooperation, as long as Russia's sovereignty is respected. Ukraine, the key issue in global geopolitics. The situation in Ukraine remains the hottest geopolitical issue worldwide. International media have described the recent Putin-Trump call as a devastating blow to Western efforts to prolong the war. Outlets like the New York Times and the Washington Post interpreted the call as a sign that Washington is finally open to negotiations with Moscow to resolve the Ukraine conflict. The news of the call stunned many in Europe, who now fear the conflict may be resolved without their active participation. Meanwhile, statements from top U.S. officials suggest that Washington's interest in Ukraine is beginning to wane. At a recent meeting in Brussels, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin stated that Ukraine's efforts to reclaim lost territories and join NATO are increasingly unrealistic. European reactions and growing anxiety. European leaders who have long championed a hardline stance against Russia are now being forced to reconsider their approach. Pressure on Ukraine to accept a negotiated settlement is increasing, and many European officials feel overwhelmed by the possibility that the U.S. and Russia may reach an agreement without consulting them. The words of German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock reflect Europe's frustration. A lasting peace for Ukraine can only be achieved with solid security guarantees and from a position of strength. However, political reality is making it clear that Europe, in many aspects, has lost control of the situation. The West's fading influence. The current shift is, of course, tied to the growing distrust in the West's ability to manage the conflict. Attempts to isolate Russia and turn the Kremlin into a diplomatic outcast have failed. From the beginning of the Ukraine crisis, Western efforts have been based on an oversimplified narrative. Russia as the ultimate enemy, the nuclear threat, the evil empire. But this approach not only failed, it has forged a stronger, more determined Russia with a renewed diplomatic vision. Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova was even more direct, declaring that the West's attempt to cancel Russia had completely failed. In a world that is moving further away from unipolarity, where international relations are built on multiple power centers, Russia's stance has gained strength. Not only has it remained firm, but it has also demonstrated to the world that it will not yield to external pressure. Russia's diplomatic evolution. Russian diplomacy, with its multipolar approach, has successfully dismantled Western narratives. This is where Russia has achieved a crucial breakthrough, consolidating an international agenda that prioritizes Zenotation spot mutual respect, Zenotation spot international law, Zenotation spot national sovereignty. Russia's approach to foreign relations has changed, and with it, the rules of the global game. In this new scenario, Western players must adapt or be left behind. Meanwhile, Russia continues moving forward, building a more balanced international order. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell to stay updated on all the latest content. Join the conversation in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. And if you want more, make sure to check out our next video, where we dive even deeper into the topic. Stay tuned.